Major General Mel Spiese is a good friend of mine. He is his last job in the Marine Corps was as Deputy Commanding General of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. But I like to remind people he's Commanding General of the Training Command. He did all the different schools in the Marine Corps, and he spent a lot of time thinking about grand strategy and great power competition. General Spiese, welcome. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Hugh. Good morning.
Thank you for doing this. I grabbed you yesterday on short notice to fill out my ranks. I've got the Navy and the Air Force. No one from the Army today. Do you think they'll be bitter?
Probably not.
I'll find someone eventually. Tell me a little bit, for the benefit of the civilians out there, how do you define grand strategy?
You know, Hugh, it is focusing on our national goals, and our national goals as they project into the future 10, 15, 25 years.
And have we been doing that very well for the last 10, 15, 25 years?
No, I don't believe so.
And why is that? When did we stop doing that?
Well, I think two things. First of all, there's no question that 9/11 and the fighting that we've done in the near 2 decades has really sucked up most of our attention, nearly all of our resources. But frankly, Hugh, since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, we've not really had a chance to reset our thinking. And I would offer that we've sort of bumbled and stumbled along, bumping into things as we went along. The Gulf War, getting wrapped up in a lot of things in the Middle East. 9/11 comes along. I don't know that we really had clarity on how we should respond in the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union. I don't believe we've ever really consolidated the victory that we achieved in the Cold War.
I agree with that. I believe that we had a period of euphoria. The peace dividend was declared. We did the thing that America has done in its history. We de-escalated our military commitments immediately down to, I think, 3.2% of GDP. And we just stopped thinking like Andrew Marshall and George Kennan and some of the great strategists. And I do believe, and I covered this with Admiral Stavridis and General Deptula today, I don't think the military stopped thinking about these issues, but I think the American culture generally did.
Well, yes. But, Hugh, we operate in this form of government where we work together. And frankly, there was a time when our civilian leadership was aligned well and drove the military thinking, and certainly through the Cold War. Even though, we made mistakes, we got sucked into things that might not have made sense in the aftermath, there was this, relatively good strategic picture and alignment that went from administration to administration. There was consistency across time, and it allowed us to build the force and array the force to what we understood our threats to be. We don't have that now, and part of it is we've been a threat-based nation, and frankly, with the collapse of the Cold War, the big threat has gone away, and we didn't take the opportunity to rethink. We've been searching for the adversary, the threat to build the force around, rather than seeing this as an opportunity, maybe a bit like Pax Romana, where we could reorient ourselves to working to preserve stability and peace, rather than trying to define a way that we build against a threat and an adversary.
Now, your colleagues who've been on the show earlier today have both said our focus on China, as did Jim Talent, our focus on China is finally obliging left to right in America to focus on the next 25 years with a little bit more clarity. Do you agree with that, General Spiese?
Yeah, yes, I do, Hugh, but I think we ought to not narrow ourselves to China, but how we deal with China ought to be a reflection on how we could look at ourselves around the world. The direct confrontation with China is probably not going to come. The confrontation with them will be on the periphery, and that drives us should be driving us to a different set of behaviors and approaches. Yes, we have to be able to deal with them if something were to happen, but the competition will be on the periphery, and we need to orient ourselves how that we can shape that and operate in that environment to our advantage.
When you say a different set of behaviors and approaches, unpack that a little bit for a civilian.
Sure. Well, again, the Cold War, we knew where the threat was, and we were able to position ourselves toe-to-toe with them, across the Central European plain. And that's where the American Army was. That's where the American Air Force was. The Navy spent a lot of their focus on making sure we could operate across the Atlantic in the event of war. Heck, even the Marines built the caves in Norway and packed them with gear so that we could operate on that flank. Well, now that's changed. We're going to have to approach things differently. We've become more of a continental United States-based force so that we operate from America, and that means we have to move to much more expeditionary forces. We need expeditionary capabilities, sea lift, and things like that. And that also means that it's going to drive us to these ideas of having access and influence and presence around the world to give us flexibility to move as the situation requires.
Now, what you said there, we've moved to being a continental force. I think that means fewer bases, more ports that are open to us, fewer permanent footprints, but a lot more places that we go to on a regular basis. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, exactly. And we warm base those, not permanently position people there. We're thinking about that now in Poland. We're doing a little bit in the Baltics. We've had a grand opportunity on the Black Sea in Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania that we've missed and we haven't taken advantage of. And we've really got to start thinking about that in places like Africa and around the Pacific Rim. We do that in partnerships, but it needs to drive us more strategically from the Pentagon and from Washington.
Now, I've always wary of confirmation bias. I believe that we are a sea power, not a continental power, and that therefore we need the 355-ship Navy. We may need more than that, but that's because I think we have become expeditionary. The United States can only project force not from bases that are around the world, but from the ships that carry American soldiers, sailors, and Marines. Do you think that is deeply held in the Pentagon, or is that still a fight that's being fought?
I think it's a fight being fought, and that's where our civilian leadership needs to provide distinct clarity. And I would say, Hugh, not a naval nation, but we're a maritime nation. So it's a little bit bigger than that, and this gets to grand strategy. Our economy is dependent on the free movement of commerce across the global commons. It's vital to us. It's not just oil. It's, the movement of commodities, finished goods, all the rest of that stuff. So it's bigger than just the Navy. So we need a national maritime strategy, and what falls out of that is a national security strategy that supports a national maritime strategy. That's shipbuilding. It's keeping the yards open. It's making sure that we have both military and commercial sea lift that's up to date. It is ports. It is access to bases around the world and exercising that routinely, as well as partnerships and alliances and things like that.
Now, that does threaten some pretty deeply vested interests. But that's not new. Every decision has always done that. How do you get civilian leadership to declare that and get it followed? Because I'm frustrated that President Trump has again and again and again in his campaign and as president declared a 355-ship Navy, and we still don't have a plan for that, although we have Acting Secretary Modly on tomorrow. Maybe he'll tell us there's one coming, but it's been 3 years.
Yeah, Hugh, I agree with that. Frankly, the place where this needs to come, if we want this to be right, something that will withstand the change of administrations, Democrat, Republican, going forward, it really needs to come from Congress. We need to have our administration frame out this larger, bigger strategy, and then Congress needs to commit itself to this national strategy that'll vary, depending on administrations and different circumstances and minor priority changes, but it gives us a good pathway into the future. And part of it is a big 355-ship Navy, but there are other things that come along with it. In particular, making the Army a bit more modular, forcing it to be an Army that moves from the states to where it needs to be, emphasizing that in the Air Force, focusing on the global commons, air and sea, and how we keep those open.
Now, since I've got you, I want to take a little bit of your experience as a Marine specifically, General. We saw pictures on Tuesday of a handful of Marines in their gear looking through a window at a mob, much like we saw in Tehran in late 1978, 79. What were you thinking about those young Marines and what they were going to do or not do if that mob had broken through?
Yeah, that's always a tough spot. The numbers typically don't play out in our favor. And obviously the failing, of course, on the Iraqi security forces who have the obligation to provide security for the embassy. And I wasn't, my belief was the Iraqis weren't going to be foolish enough to do a Tehran. We're in their country. We weren't in Iran, right? So we already have a footprint there. The ability to respond to that, which could include punishing reprisals, sits within there. And we, frankly, with our relationship with them, hold the key to their secure future if that's one not to be dominated by Iran. So my sense was it wasn't going to be a disaster. I'm thankful that we moved people in because you never know what can happen with mobs on the ground. I think the Marines were prepared that if lives were no kidding in danger, there were a bunch of Iraqis who were going to end up dead, as they should be.
No, I saw a couple of Ospreys, in fact, I think 3, fly in and settle down. That was a controversial acquisition. Is that what it is designed to do, what it did yesterday?
Yes, it is a remarkable airplane, and it has transformed how we do movement of people by means other than jet aircraft. It's got great speed. It has found the right tactics. We've not had one shot down in combat. We've had some damage, but it's a great airplane. It's got speed. It's got range. Israelis are buying them. The Japanese are buying them. The Navy is converting the Greyhound. So it's a remarkable platform, and I believe the future of Army aviation looks to tilt rotor as well.
And so how many Marines are in each one of those? When they landed, what did that, the Marines are coming to reinforce the Marines, how many Marines were on each of those Ospreys?
Oh, gosh, Hugh, I think we can get 22 to 24 combat-loaded Marines in those aircraft.
So now do you believe that embassy is fully equipped to repel any additional attack?
Yeah, no question in my mind. And anybody who tried to take it now would be a mess for them. They would have to attack it with a pretty substantial military force if there was any chance of overrunning it. And
last question, General, do you think the rules of engagement would provide the Marines the right to act in self-defense without question?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. These are tough spots. We're in somebody else's country. They're supposed to be providing the security for us. This is a Department of State responsibility more than Department of Defense. Once, the aircraft start moving and reinforce, we come a little bit closer together. But, yeah, Hugh, there's no question. I think in the situation in Tehran, there was no reinforcement coming. There was no hope. And to fight that one might have been more suicidal. In the case of what we've got going on in Iraq, I think the conditions favor us defending and securing the embassy far greater.
General Mel Spiese, I look forward to talking to you early and often throughout 2020. Thanks for your emphasis. Thanks for your spending some time with me, and Happy New Year to you.
Thanks to you too, Hugh.
Thank you.